Slavery in the colonies. The Atlantic slave trade. The Atlantic slave trade played a key role in the colonial economy. The African slave trade increased because of the need for labor in American colonies. Slaves were captured in the interior of Africa and were exchanged for weapons and supplies in the trading ports. They were transported to America on ships, in the cruelest of conditions. Triangular trade was the exchange of people and goods between Europe, Africa, and the American colonies. Europe shipped weapons, fabrics, and knickknacks to Africa and traded them for slaves. Slaves in the American colonies were traded for fish, tobacco, sugar, and coffee. These products from the colonies were sold in Europe. Slavery in the colonies. The increasing plantations in the southern colonies made them dependent on slave labor. In the plantations in the southern colonies, slavery became the easiest way to guarantee lifetime labor. For the plantation owners, this was better than having servants, since servants' contracts would eventually expire and they would leave. Many colonies approved laws to keep their slaves for life. Children born from slaves became slaves themselves. There were some attempts to try to stop slavery, but none were successful. Slaves rebelled unsuccessfully several times. To avoid rebellions, the colonies wrote the slave codes that restricted the activities that were allowed to slaves. These codes did not stop the revolts and discontent of slaves until 1865, when slavery ended. African cultural influences. The arrival of African slaves enriched culture, music, crafts, and other aspects of colonial life. The life of the slaves during colonial times varied depending on the colony in which they lived. In the northern colonies, slaves were treated as servants and could buy their own freedom, while in the southern colonies they worked in plantations. In the southern colonies, they had little contact with whites, so they kept their African traditions. They wove baskets and created a language, mixture of English and several African dialects. They introduced traditions such as crafts, musical rhythms with drums, and so on.